this? I don't know. Are we for it?
Have we had any?
No problem. They're quite just sensitive. Can we make a start?
14.
Thank you. Hi, Jodie.
How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, you?
Yes.
Yeah, watching the Mickey Mouse stuff on television. This is one of them committees where we just get on and do the job because we're providing a service, aren't we? So let them all play around down there and we'll carry on trying to support you in the fire service. Okay, so we moved to item 1, which we've got apologies for absence, which we're not quite sure on. They're quite...
No to report now.
None?
None to report now.
Well, he's just come through and said he's late. He might be on that. They're doing something. Is it gas on Mappy Top? They've got it all, quite a long piece blocked off on there. So he might be on that. I don't know about the other two. I've not heard anything. So we'll record him as missing then. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Hopefully we're all interested. We are. Minutes of the meeting, that's on page 3 to page 8. We'll just move those as a record. We don't have any there's no items I don't think coming on there, unless everybody wants to raise anything. And we'll move straight over to agenda item 4, which is a Revenue Capital Prudential Code Monitoring Report to 30th of November. Okay.
Yeah.
Doing it, Tom?
Yeah, it's with me. Thank you, Chair. So within this report, we're asking members to scrutinise the financial forecast, approving setting up of two earmarked revenue reserves, and then approve the movements within the capital programme. So within paragraph 2, it just sets out that the initial underspend forecast was around 800,000, which represents 1.37% of the revised budget, and then within that, the Chief Fire Officer has approved the 3 environments set out in the table just below the paragraph, which is moving some revenue underspends into capital financing, which is in line with the policy and what we did as part of the previous monitoring we took. So following that environment, the underspend is reduced to 442,000, which comes in at just 0.25%. So within paragraph 2.2 just sets out that if the 2 new earmarked reserves are approved, then that underspend will reduce further to 348,000. So if I move just to table 2, this sets out of obviously all the budget areas and how it's funded. So the 442 underspend, obviously that means we're saying we're no longer required to draw down the 261,000 of from the budget of the earmarked reserve. I'll go in and I'll talk about the larger variances within further down. So within paragraph 2.6, obviously within the whole time underspend. Obviously that underspend is 16,000 due to underspend on basic pay, and then 250,000 on pension contributions, and then obviously to counter that we have got an overspend on national insurance. The overspend on national insurance is due to increased overtime activity just to cover the staffing shortfalls, as we've discussed previously, we are under establishment. Then if we move on to paragraph 2.8, so within non-uniform pay, we have got an overspend of 230,000. This is due to the pay award being higher than what was built into the original budget, and obviously within the budget we do build in a vacancy factor, and the vacancies we are carrying is lower than what we built into the budget. So there's a underspend within that area. And then within pensions, we've got an overspend of 278,000. That's largely related to the McLeod pension and compensation payments, but that overspend is then offset within other income, because we do have grants to cover those payments. Then if I move on to the premises underspend, so that's paragraph 211. So within our premises costs, we've got underspend of 107,000. This is largely due to underspend on our gas and electric, so our utilities. And as reported to October Financial Resources Board, we've completed a review of that area and declared an underspend in this year, and then also, as I'll touch on in later reports, how we've reduced our budget accordingly in future years. So the next paragraph, 2.13, within supplies and services, where we have a overspend of 101,000. Picking out large items, as reported previously, we've got underspend relating to the filing contract changes. Then within ICT software, there have been some inflationary increases, and of 82,000, and then 93,000 overspend related to partnership contributions in relation to the Resilience Forum. But like the pension I talked about a few moments ago, that is also funded by grants within other income. So the next area with the large variance is paragraph 216, other income, where we've got a 922,000 surplus. So within that there's 184,000 within our treasury investments. This is because we're holding large investments than we forecast at the beginning of the year, following receipt of a pension grant. And then within the following two bullet points, these are the pension grants and the local partnership funding, which I've discussed previously. And then also within here there's detail about the 64,000 reserve, which we're requesting to be set up as part of the protection uplift grant.
Tom, can I just stop you there? You know that 300k in government grant funding, do we have to spend it by a certain day? Because sometimes they claw it back, don't they, towards the end of the financial year?
No, it's if it's some of it we have to spend, some of it we have to spend this year, and we are forecasted to spend, but other amounts we can, if any unspent amounts.
Thing, or whatever they call it.
No, so there's, none of it is at risk of clawback.
Thank you.
Yeah, so within the 64,000 pension uplift grant, we're looking for that to be moved to a reserve, because within the conditions it doesn't have to be spent this year. We're not forecasting it to be spent. and same within the local resilience forum, there's 30,000 of that funding we're wanting to move to reserve, just to mitigate any future risks of redundancy within that team. So if I move to the efficiency saving area in table 3, there's been no movement within this area since it was last reported in October. So obviously progress is being reviewed by the strategic leadership team on actions that are going to be taken where appropriate. So, and then table 4 just shows the movement within our reserves. So at the beginning of the year we had 11.5 million, and then with what we're forecasting to draw down, this reduces to 10. It's forecast to reduce to 10.7 at the end of the financial year. Moving on to the capital programme, and within paragraph 2.22, that just sets out that since October, the Chief Fire Officers approved environments to set up two new capital schemes, which are being funded from this year's underspend. So which is AdBlue pump installation and some new scanners for asset logging. So taking those additions into account is within table 5. So we've got an approved capital budget of just under 9.5 million. Obviously spend to date is 2 million, and then the forecast has reduced to 8.9 million. So within, obviously we've got we're asking for approval to slip just over 400,000, and details of those schemes on paragraph 25.2, and then we've also got underspend, which we're looking to release of 164,000. So the slippage within paragraph 25.2 is, well, we've got some acceleration on the Stock Hill project, just to take into account the surveys and design costs that are looking to be complete by March. And then access inclusion, 2 sites have slipped, which is Hucknall and Southall, and that's due to delays in obtaining planning approval. And then within ICT, there's been 95,000 slipped as part of the replacement mobilising system, and that takes into account the report that was presented to Fire Authority in December. Then then in paragraph 2.26, we're just setting out the 2 schemes which are declaring underspend. So that's in the compartment fire behaviour training, which has got an £86,000 underspend due to confirmation of contractual value. An element of the contingency has been released, and then 78,000 within special appliances following a review, and we have sufficient budget in place to purchase the vehicles planned this year. Then within the Prudential Code Monitoring section, within table 6, I'll just pull out where there's movements between the indicators and the current estimate. So the estimate of the capital financing requirement, which was just over 43 million, is now 39,175,000. This movement is largely due to the sale of the old headquarters. So it's recognising as applying that capital receipt. And then within the local indicators, the upper limit for internal borrowing as a percentage of the capital financing requirement was set at 20, and we're at 29.5%, and the proportion of net debt to gross debt, which had a lower limit of 50%, and we're at 38. I'll cover that in a minute within paragraph 2.31. And then with investment yield, right at the bottom of that table, where we benchmark ourselves against the SONIA rate at 3.99, we're currently at 3.9, but as discussed previously, we are looking at money market funds to try and achieve a high percentage. So within paragraph 2.31, obviously it sets out why we're basically temporarily breach these potential indicators. As touched on earlier, we've received a large amount of grant funding for the McLeod and Matthews, so it's delayed our need to externally borrow, and then also for the net debt to gross debt, it's due to the same reason that we are carrying high investment balances. But these temporary breaches are permissible under the SIPFA code. And then within that report, obviously, we've got the standard appendices which we normally provide, which set out basically the reserve movements, and then the capital movements set out by scheme. Is there any questions?
Yeah, thanks. Just for the questions. Sorry, Maria, I forgot to sneaked in. Or my new glasses don't work, something like that. Welcome to the finance. And for those who don't know, it's Maria Fox, our new finance head of finance officer. So you can give her the headaches. Okay. Are there any questions on that?
Yeah,
Thanks, Terry.
A couple, if you will,
Yeah,
please, Tom.
what's the couple?
Just the general reserve is predicted to be 5.2, which is $1 million above the minimum of 4.2. Paragraph 2.21.
Yeah.
Where does that £1 million sit with regards to being able to be allocated to, like a fire appliance or a couple of fire appliances and stuff like that? Can we utilise that? £1 million?
Yeah. So obviously at the moment that £1 million is held in cash within the authority. So it's part of our investment and investment income which we are generating. So if obviously it's best practice to have a bit of buffer over the minimum general fund of reserve, but because I think
I mean, I accept the fact that we like to have a buffer, and it's good to have a buffer, don't get me wrong. But when I hear complaints that we don't have enough equipment, or we don't have enough safety wear and store, or safety wear is getting dated and stuff like that, if we've got £1 million sat there, I mean, I don't know how much a new fire appliance is, but I'd rather have a new fire appliance than £1 million sat in the bank doing nothing, or gaining some interest. And that's I suppose where my question's going is, could we use that to buy better a new fire appliance for or invest in new equipment or something like that, rather than it sitting there?
Yeah, yes.
I think, Tom, if I perhaps just come in on that as well, I think absolutely, when obviously this is the in-year position that very similar to what was reported back in October at the last meeting. I mean, there's a budget report, setting report later on the agenda, which does look at that very thing in terms of where the reserves are going to be applied and what the proposals are for next year's budget. But it is, I think at the time, obviously when this monitoring was done, we were still waiting on the settlement announcement, and we weren't sure what the position would be in that, in terms of whether that would be favourable to the authority. And obviously, perhaps when we come onto the budget report, we can hopefully explain where some of those reserves are going to be applied in more detail. I don't know whether that's you want to stand in on top.
Yeah, so within at the December Fire Authority, as part of the budget, the minimum level of reserves is increasing from 4.25 to 4.6. So that does take some of some of the buffer out, and also within the budget report next year we are by, I think, having 17 fire appliances this year. We're buying another 5. We are buying another. We're already built in to buy another 5 next year.
And again, I understand that, but that's already built in. This is a bit of extra money cash that we could invest into our troops on the ground to get the equipment or give them better services. So, and I have another one, Chair, if you will, please.
Yeah, please.
You say there's we've got a breach in the paragraph 2.31. There's a breach in the.
Yeah.
Is there any financial penalties if we maintain that breach?
I think, I mean, Tom, I don't know whether you want to sort of, in terms of the position at the moment, if that was a sustained position, an implication that the authority were in breach of the limits, I think, because it relates to the temporary holding of that additional pension cash. Yeah. That is acceptable at the moment.
But we'll have no.
It can't be a long-term position. It needs to be a short-term position within the financial year.
So we won't have HMRC chasing us then?
No. Yeah. The things, and also these indicators as part of a Treasury report coming to February's fire authority, it is something we will look at and discuss then, that if we are in a position where we are going to potentially look to carry more cash long term, we can look to move these into. These indicators are set by us. So if it is a permanent type of change, we can move them if we feel it's best in the financial interests.
Perfect. Thank you.
Jody.
Thank you, Chair. A question around sort of 2.14 and general question within the ICT licensing costs. So I notice here that I'm not sure if it's Microsoft increases of 238k Microsoft licenses, or if that's a general across all software.
It's across all.
It's across all
software. Again, within the budget report, with going forward as part of the budget, we have split out that we have built in, because a lot of Microsoft licenses going up in the budget for next year, 250,000.
Are they inflation? Are they inflation rises?
Yes.
Changes to no change to service or improvement.
No, well, yes, it's based just it's just the inflationary pressures on what we had built into the budget.
No, my question was more around the scope of what sort of leverage that we have with Microsoft and these software providers for, because you're essentially trapped sometimes, particularly if you're in Microsoft's ecosystem, if you don't pay, they pull the plug, kind of thing. So obviously I know there are other providers out there, but there's big transformation costs. So, £250,000, is that have we seen that year on year, or?
For Microsoft going forwards, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it is something that's been recognised nationally by the National Fire Chiefs Council, and not just by fire, but it's also been recognised in policing as well as a particular challenge, and local government. So there is work going on through Blue Light Commercial, who provide some support into fire as well as policing. Have some bit more clout really to deal with some of these challenges that's facing the sector, because, as you say, that there is a bit of a captive market there, and there is recognition that within individual fire services there isn't necessarily the capacity to deal with that. I mean, Richard might come on to some of the contracting stuff a bit later, but it is there's a few examples like that. Richard aren't aware of. Nationally, they're trying to sort of provide a bit more capacity to make sure they actively manage some of those pressures.
Thank you.
That's a good point, Jody. Just do we ever scrutinise? Because I'm seeing this across, obviously being on 3 authorities. That sounds greedy, but being on 3 authorities, I'm seeing this IT's going out there, and I know the cyber things, because we've recently had problems with cyber attacks, and somebody keeps putting notes on the end of it.
Yeah.
Is it something we've got to live with, or is it something to we challenge it every now and then? So we understand it, because I don't understand all of it, far from it. You're the people that are dealing with it. But does it need us to, at some point, scrutinise that particular sort of way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah. Because you know, we just accept Microsoft are obviously a massive company, and Microsoft are everywhere, but you know they're essentially operating, in my view, as a you know you're a captive market, and you've got no choice but to pay it. But there are other alternatives, but there are costs associated with that as well. But you know, you see that you know £250,000 just in inflation for software costs. It's you know it's a big chunk.
A bit like going around a car showroom, isn't it? Look at that, isn't it lovely? It's all nice and shiny.
Yeah.
And then you know the prices have been lifted and lifted.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
lifted. Is there any way we can look at a bit more in depth as members, so as we get it completely in there?
Yeah, so it will come through as, although we are linked to Microsoft, we do still go through the same procurement processes to buy that as we would anything else. So when the contract is up for renewal, it will come through as part of the procurement update. We will make a recommendation to members about the route to market and how we would recommend to do that. Obviously, public sector procurement is centred around building in competition to try and get best value, but there are a number of supplies and services that we buy where there are limited suppliers available to us. So I think, and Richard, please jump in if you've got anything to add. I'll introduce, this is Richard Henshaw, he's our procurement manager.
No, Richard.
There are ways of engineering some competition, even if you remain with Microsoft, but
Yes,
they are
different resellers.
You'll be aware they are limited.
I think once we've got the software though, it's about licensing, isn't it? It's where the cost is.
You pay on knowing costs.
And that's what you're seeing at the moment, that obviously that contract will be due for a full renewal at some point, but as we are at the minute, we're just in the inflationary.
There are different resellers that can go through, whether we use a framework or we did open tender. We'd probably use a framework, something like this anyway. We could then do a mini competition to get as much competition as possibly can do. Same as what Simon said. Blue Light Commercial are there that are covering fire and police. So
and that's national.
It is, to hopefully try and get sort of economies of scale, because us as a fire service are quite small, particularly for Microsoft. You know, so the more people that we can get in, you know, one basket, the better.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Richard, number 2? Yeah. In my office, I'm number 1. I'll take number 2. I think the use of technology and software is a really interesting topic, and I look at lots of different public sector organisations, and I work in a very large corporate one. And the angle to look at it from our point of view is that it kind of is inevitable, I think, for software costs and technology costs to increase. But the reason for the investment in that, quite often when you're looking at a project to invest more money in particular software or particular technology platform, is that it will either lead to better outcomes. So if there's an information dashboard that you're investing in with Microsoft or whoever, whichever the supplier is, part of the reason for doing that is that your officers will have much better information and to be able to bring you better information to make decisions. In the same way that other costs can be sometimes to reduce staff costs. So instead of preparing financial reports, instead of taking lots and lots of time to prepare them, you could get dashboards to do it for you, and it reduces the amount of time it needs to then free up other time or reduce the amount of time you need in finance team. So that's the angle to look at it. So it can be in isolation, finance IT costs go up, but is there better information and quality information or reduce costs somewhere else? So that's the angle that I think is a helpful angle to look at it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? All right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the table 3, efficiency program. As I can see that it is a shortfall of 66K, yeah?
Yeah.
So what is the corrective actions are being considered on that? And on the same table, I can see the cybersecurity savings not achieved, as you can see there. Does this reflect the increased risk exposure on that?
Yes. Well, so obviously the action within the tables, obviously we've not achieved the 66,000. So we will obviously try and look at, and as I mentioned, it has been going to be progress been reviewed by SLT. Obviously, the impact of that 66,000, if it was achieved, underspend variance instead of being 442 would in theory increase by 66. So even though that hasn't been achieved, obviously we're still in a good revenue position due to our underspend. And with the cyber security, they were looking at delivering it when the officially was put in. They were looking at delivering it. We had kind of more than one kind of ongoing contracts, and they looked to close one and use the other one more effectively. But in doing that, the cost of the other one kind of went up, so there's no kind of saving achieved by us going from 2 contracts down to the 1.
Okay. All right.
And I think, Tom, that reflects some of what we discussed, I think, at last Finance and Resources Committee, wasn't it, in terms of the expectations and the requirements around cyber security are growing, and then unsurprisingly perhaps the suppliers are reflecting that in the pricing, given the demand that they're seeing.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
No further questions? Further questions? Move that recommendation. It's on page 22. The second. Thank you. Move on to item 5. Just some places will browse over this, no doubt, over the next few weeks. Budget proposals, but they can just take this through.
Yeah, it's me again, Chair. So within the report, obviously we're asking members to consider proposed draft budget, and in respect of increasing council tax up to the maximum of £5, and also like to provide a view on the pay assumptions within the 26-27 budget. So, well, first of all, I'm just going to paragraph 2.2. So obviously when the medium-term financial strategy was reported at the Fire Authority, we did report a deficit of 2.93. Council tax was increased by £5 or just over £1 million deficit if it was capped at 295. Obviously, since then, within Table 1, what that sets out is what the movements in funding since the medium-term financial strategy and the provisional settlement. Obviously, within here, we have assumed that the council tax is increased by £5. So as we discussed that at the Fire Authority in December, the financial position and the financial figures we were getting were moving almost by the day. But as this table sets out, the settlement funding we're getting across the 3 years is more than what we previously reported within December's Fire Authority. So obviously, just point out that settlement funding figure is a combination of like business rates which we retain, the revenue support grant, but revenue support grant has had a Section 31 grant and our employers NI grant now rolled into it. So within paragraph 2.7, it just points out that the provisional settlement has also indicated that the 5 set will be available in each of those financial years. Obviously, that's a decision that is made on a precept decision is made on an annual basis. Paragraph 2.8 just points out that when government did share the provisional settlement and the policy settlement, they confirmed there's an assumption that the authority will take the full precept available as the £5 council tax funding has kind of been built into our settlement funding calculation. So if we just move on to the revenue budget. So within paragraph 2.10, again the figures we bought as part of December's Fire Authority, we did have the pay award in at 4%. After discussion with the NFCC, it's been reduced to 3% for 26-27 and 27-28, and then 2% going forwards. Obviously, that 3% is in line with the GDP deflator, which is the funding for that has affected other fire services. Obviously, as the paragraph sets out, any increase above that, so 1% increase is equivalent to around 331,000 costs. So, and then obviously the other movements within paragraph 2.12, we're increasing the repairs budget on buildings by 188,000. So that's just to obviously cover the cost of works that have been identified that need to be carried out in the next financial year. Paragraph 2.13, as I touched on earlier, just it's a decrease in that energy and water rates budget by 134,000. Obviously, that, as it says, obviously we as a fire service, we do purchase our gas and electric through a framework. And then paragraph 2.14, we've got basically inflationary increases of 238,000 built into next year's budget, and then we have forecasted a filing contract saving of 375,000. Paragraph 2.15 just sets out the Section 31 grant. By that Section 31 grant and employers grant have been rolled into funding allocation. The pension grant has historically been classed as income, but to match government's intention for that to be rolled into our into our funding, that has been moved from income down into our funding to reduce our or increase our budget requirements. So within other grants, we're now recognising growth due to the Local Resilience Forum of grant of 193 and partner contributions of 87,000. With an interest payable and receivable, we are, as we touched on in the forecasting, we are expecting that pension grant to be paid out, and due to the capital programme, we are forecast increased interest payable, and because we'll be carrying smaller cash balance and interest rates decreasing, we're forecasting a decrease in our interest receivable budget. Then within the paragraph 2.20, we've increased our corporate contingency by 259,000 basically due to increased risks within risk register and the general fund risk assessment. So paragraph 2.24, that just is kind of an update on what we discussed earlier. So our general fund reserve is forecast to be 5.3, and the minimum level is as approved is 4.6. And then within earmark reserves, we're forecasting 5.5 million, but 1.1 of that is is our budget pressure reserve. So then if I skip forward to table 2, that sets out once all those movements have been built into our budget. For 26-27, our budget requirement is just over 62 million, and then with all relevant funding based on a £5 precept, we to remain the status quo across the financial years. Obviously, with the £5 precept, we are carrying a small deficit. And then below that, it just shows what the council, what the deficit would be if council tax was capped at the previous 2.95%, which obviously would require significant savings to be made, because obviously the reserve of 1.1 million would be insufficient to cover those costs. Because as table 2 shows, that the difference between the 295 and the £5 is worth 376,000 to the authority. So just to bring the council's attention, just table 3 just sets out what the annual council tax is at present, and then based on the £5 increase, what the council tax would be for each of the council tax bands. So as 2.37 sets out, obviously at the December Fire Authority meeting, obviously like it did, like obviously recommend that this committee basically works within the guidelines that were approved, and like and to recommend basically the council tax precept to the Fire Authority, and then any options of addressing any revenue deficit. So one thing which we have added to what table 4 does, the local government association did some benchmarking across the fire authorities, which sets out, which compares our fire service basically to the average across the country, and what that shows in for 24-25, our spend per £1,000 population on basically our net spend and spend on workforce is either 2,000 or 3,000 less than the national average, and then for 23-24, we number of incidents we attend per station is also more than the average, which hopefully helps counts where that as a fire authority we are already operating more efficiently than the national average. So if we move on to the capital budget, paragraph 2.42 obviously just sets out the capital programme for 26-27, or says that the capital programme for 26-27 is 9.3 million. Obviously it will increase depending on the slippage from this financial year, and then the paragraph below just sets out some of the major schemes for the next financial year, which, as previously mentioned, is purchase of 5 new fire appliances, installation of the RMS system, and purchase of special appliances and equipment following that on special review, and then the commencement of redevelopment of the Stockhill fire station. So and then obviously within this report I've appended like Appendix A, which sets out the like basically a breakdown of the annual budgets for each financial year. Appendix B sets out the reserves in software. Well, so that obviously, as we mentioned earlier, there's a software license increases in that. So it starts with this year's budget and then it comes to the revised budget requirement for 26-27, and then Appendix C sets out the capital programme and then a small table at the bottom of that just with the relevant funding of that spend.
Thanks, Tom. I mean, just to add to Tom's review of the report there, just to reassure members, as the Treasurer to the authority, I've worked with Tom and the team in terms of the assumptions that have gone into that budget paper. And we had some discussions at the pre-budget report in December as well around council tax and what might happen around funding. And as you see from that, the funding position is improved on what we were expecting, certainly when the medium-term financial plan was set back in February last year. That does present us with some opportunities to invest. So taking some of the comments that members have made on board, you'll see, as Tom described there are some significant investments in the capital programme in some of the areas that members will no doubt be interested in. I think the other thing from my point of view, again, in terms of responsibilities of the authority and myself as Treasurer, is demonstrating value for money, as Tom has described. So certainly the plans and the progress that the authority has made in being able to pay down some of the debts that we spoke about again at the last meeting and at the Fire Authority is helpful to give the headroom to further projects that need to come forward. It also responds to some of the HMIC recommendations around looking at the level of borrowing that the authority has got as well, and being able to use some of the revenue funds from reserves to fund the programme in the future. I think the other thing in terms of the £5 maximum council tax, and you'll have seen this in the last 2 or 3 years, that's built into what the government call as the comprehensive spending power assessment, which is effectively seen as an overall funding pot for not just for fire but for local government and for police as well. So whilst obviously it's still a member decision when it comes to the £5 precept, there is an expectation from, I think as I said, at the Fire Authority back in December, that from government that will be used to its full extent in looking at the budget for next year. And obviously in the context of the wider council tax bill that goes forward to council taxpayers, fire is a relatively small proportion. I'm not sort of dismissing the significance of the decision that's going to have to be made, but it is in terms of the amount that gets delivered, the precept from fire is significant based on a small proportion that makes up of the council tax bill. So I suppose that's just a bit of context I wanted to provide before opening up to any questions.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, we've gone through the draft budget thing. On 10.2, who's given some sort of summary on the view on the pay award sections? I understand the unions have started to jump in.
Yeah, I think the position on the pay award, and Tom might want to come in on this as well, is there is a National Fire Chiefs Council position, which is part of the national negotiations that they conduct with the NJC, and again, maybe want to come in on that as well. But what we have done is give that contingency there as a reserve, earmarked reserve, if that pay award does go beyond that national benchmark that's been set by the National Fire Chiefs Council.
Yeah, so obviously the NJC negotiate pay awards on behalf of all of fire and rescue services as the employers. We are attending regular briefings with regards to both the anticipated pay award for next financial year. There's also a larger piece of work which is ongoing, which you may have heard about, and is causing some local issues as well with regards to additional payments for skills. and what the role of the firefighter is and what the role of the fire and rescue service is, so that's part of a bigger conversation which is also happening nationally. That's not likely to be completed in time for the 26-27 pay award. So as Simon said, on the advice of the National Fire Chiefs Council, it's a benefit to us to present a unified voice as national employers. So that's the recommendation to the authority with regards to setting that within our own budget.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you know, if it came in with a larger than amount put in, what do we do then?
So we've got the 1% contingency which we have built in, and then as the report says that anything over that would be a budget pressure for us of around about 330,000 per 1% over and above.
Yeah.
So I remember when I chaired the police authority, I was over there with we had a fire strike, and we had the military and everybody in there, and it cost us a fair amount as a fire authority and police to deal with it. Have we got? Does that come out of the reserves or?
Yes, so that wouldn't be an option that would be open to us in the event of industrial action now.
No.
But do you mean any additional expenditure would it come out of the general fund?
Just come out to the general fund.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Just to come out, we've actually got a 1.5% to cover basically. Obviously, we are hoping that some of that could potentially cover any other inflationary pressures, but there's enough to cover basically up to 1.5%. And within when we do the general fund risk assessment, that came to 4.6 million. Within that figure is an amount that has been set aside for industrial action.
Yeah.
And there was an additional contingency reserve there that was mentioned that is available if needs be, and also a further sort of reserve that protects the authority in the event of not dealing with some of the savings. So there are some other options there, but obviously the first port of call will be that 1.5% contingency.
So we're satisfied at the moment. Any questions?
I've just one point I'd like to make, that, and I'm sure it's on the fire chief's radar, is that the FBU sent the letter out to the press recently about their concerns, which ultimately potentially has to lead on to industrial action. And have we forecast or have we got something in mind to cover that aspect if these decide that they're still not happy and they want to pursue a industrial action to make changes? Have we got that in mind as well? Have we looked at that?
So I'll just...
And it's probably more for you, Leela, and...
Yeah. So I think there's two things. With regards to the letter, you'll see that some of the reason that we are here is because we have used the establishment as a way of mitigating short-term budget pressures that we've had. So we've taken known decisions both last year and in previous years, because we have forecast significant budget deficits in years, and one of the ways of mitigating that risk is to, for a short period of time, be under establishment as an organisation, because that creates you in-year savings. So in terms of setting the scene, over the past 2 or 3 years, I think 2 years ago, we were running a public consultation with a view to potentially looking to save up to £3 million, and then fortunately that year we were given the additional council tax flexibility of £5, which meant that we didn't need to take those actions. What you are seeing in the workforce at the minute is the impact of some of those pressures that they have felt this year, because of the decisions that we've taken to balance the budget. I think what the £5 gives us the opportunity to do is to stabilise that position. It allows us to forecast over a longer term. We've been managing within 1 year budget settlements for a number of years now, which is also really challenging when you don't get your budget settlement until Christmas, to then try and make savings from April onwards. one of the only flexibilities that you've got, because workforce is such a significant part of our budget, is to do either short-term establishment management to balance in year. I think with regards specifically to industrial action, it is a risk. I know members have had presentations for Fire Authority about the arrangements that we have in place. There's a lot of work ongoing, and as Tom said, when we did that general fund reserve risk assessment, one of the things that will have played into that is the risk of industrial action, which is one of the reasons why you've seen that general fund reserve requirement increase. So we've got the money there if we need it to
and that was ultimately the making sure we are covered.
Yes.
Worst case scenario. Thank you.
I think just to add to what Lena said, the approach that the authority have adopted in managing those vacancies, and it's the same with managing underspends, as a deliberate policy. It's not as a result of any sort of unexpected outcome. It's very typical of what I'm seeing in my role with SITFA across many other, not just fire authorities, across police and local government, where they're having to make those difficult decisions around resilience and capacity, given the fact that this year we've had the fair funding review. There's been the uncertainty around council tax, as David's mentioned. There's been the uncertainty around whether there'll be a 3-year settlement. So in my experience, this has been one of the most unpredictable budgets and forecasting sort of positions we've been in, and Tom and I have had numerous phone calls. As figures have changed over the last few months as well. So I think that was a prudent approach, and obviously what that has done is meant that, as Naylor said, you haven't had to come back at the moment with any significant sort of permanent proposals around changing station provision, appliance provision, which I know certainly was the case a few years ago.
Thank you. Sorry, Terry.
The 17 new appliances and the potential 5 for next year. So are they replacements for the older stock, and those older stock will be sold off?
So we'll take a procurement decision as to what the most appropriate route for disposal is for those, but there's a number of options that are considered in terms of either selling them, donation, but because of the age of them, I couldn't tell you what the value is, Richard. I don't
It's
know
not
if
more.
you can, but
5 or 10 grand each. It's really minimal when you consider the actual cost of them. You don't get the almost scrap.
Yeah.
It's just scrap value almost really.
Well, I think that, and I take the 10 grand per unit. If we're getting rid of 17, that's £170,000 we could reinvest into the fire service somewhere. Rather than just giving it away. So again, that's just something we're considering.
Without the £5 increase, just so we can be clear, what would savings look like? You mentioned obviously additional savings would be required. Where would you see savings being made?
So I think when you look at table 2, to not take the £5, if a decision was taken to take the 2.95%, then we'd be looking at around about £750,000 deficit for this year. As I've said, around about 80% of the cost of this organisation are workforce costs. So to make permanent savings, the place that you would go to look would be people. So when you look at the impact in future years as well, by 29-30, you're up to nearly £3 million deficit, which would have an impact on frontline operational fire.
Would that be frontline fire officers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so to be clear on that, what that actually look like, what the real world consequences.
Again, when you look at the disposition of our workforce, so 80% of our costs there or thereabouts are people, and of that, the vast majority of those costs are operational firefighters. We run a very lean support structure, and HR committee will receive updates on the balance of our workforce and establishment numbers. What we would call green book, so people who are on local government terms and conditions, those staff are also service delivery staff in a lot of occasions. So they'll work in our prevention and community safety team, or they'll be working in our fire protection, so enforcing fire safety legislation in commercial premises. So not all Green Book staff would be what you traditionally call back office or support staff as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Zoe. And Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know you already touched on that contingency that has been increased by 259 due to the heightened of risk. So can you outline the key risk, the most likely to trigger using this contingency? So, is there?
Yes, well, the most likely thing is the wider pay negotiations that happen nationally. So obviously, if they are settled above the 3%, which the NFCC have advised, then obviously that contingency will then have to be used to cover and the differential between the two.
Okay, so, well, yeah.
And there can be examples, and we've had it in the past, where suppliers might go into liquidation, which might mean that, again, there's a need to look at short-term provision, which obviously sometimes comes at cost as well. So there are things, and I'm thinking about some of the projects and the national projects and regional projects that the authority are involved in. You know, there are challenges around delivery of some of that, which again might require some short-term funding in the year to cover that. So some of them might well be contractual challenges that are unforeseen. You know, we talked a bit about the ICT costs earlier. There might be some new security standards or new expectations in those areas that again could mean we have to call on that contingency.
Okay. John Jones.
Well, wasn't, but I will. I think we can all agree that Notts Fire and Rescue is a well-run service. And as Lady said, we run a very lean outfit. I know our job as members is to scrutinise, to question, and whatever, but it is a frontline blue light service, and it's not our job to make decisions that could potentially cause a reduction in frontline troops. Personally, it's £5. That's my position here, not anyone else. If we can find some savings in ICT, that'd be great. And don't give away the appliances. I think might make a really nice camper van. I'm interested.
You've got one sold already.
I think the thing to bear in mind as well is that the Home Office, we're obligated to each year present an efficiency report to them, which sets out, they set as a target to generate 2% non-pay efficiencies and a 3% increase in productivity year on year, and we have to publish an annual report about how we're going to do that. So I just wanted you to have in your minds that accepting a precept increase won't diminish our energy and efforts to continue to drive the productivity and the efficiency of this organisation.
Okay.
Surely, follow up on that, surely there becomes a point where you are as lean as you can possibly get. Would the Home Office still expect you to continue?
So it's something that they've been doing, I think, in policing for a number of years, isn't it, Simon? And it was introduced to Fire and Rescue about 3 years ago. So,
you see, I look at it spinning around. I'm not involved in this industry at all, but I look at it from again. This is a frontline blue light service. This is an emergency service. To be constantly put under pressure to streamline, to become leaner and leaner, ultimately it's going to compromise things. I'm not convinced that that's a healthy way to run an emergency service. That's just me.
Yeah. I mean, I think the reassuring thing from my point of view, again, hopefully to members, is, as you described later, there's around an assessment around whether the authority delivering against its response standards, whether it's delivery against the nationally set performance standards that are set by HMI as well. And I think at the moment, obviously, those standards are being met, but you're right, there is always that challenge around what does best value mean. Best value is assessing whether the spending and the cost to the taxpayer is delivering an appropriate service. So I think certainly if those performance standards start to slip, that does suggest that there's more fundamental challenges there around how that what that means for funding, what that means for supporting the service.
Sorry. No, I think it's always, kind of echo what John says. I agree. I do think it's always worth making savings where we can, like ICT and procurement costs, but certainly not at the expense of frontline staff, frontline appliances, and bread and butter of what the service does. Yeah.
We are down. Is it about 30 vehicles? 30 pumps, is it? Yeah. Whether they're all running. Might be a searching question, but I don't think we can go any lower. I know when I got on here some years ago, I said if it goes below 30, I'm out. Because there's some way they must be funding this, as you've said, John. It's a frontline service, it's essential service, and it needs to be funded properly.
I think just to pick up on that, in terms of, you will have seen the letter that's been published, and I know sent to members. There are some pressures being felt in the workforce, notwithstanding the information that was presented to the Community Safety Committee last week in terms of appliance availability. We're over 97% appliance availability for whole time, and around about 83-84% appliance availability for on-call, which is in the top 3 or 4 services in the country. So yes, there's some pressure being felt in the workforce, but in terms of frontline services that our communities are receiving, that it is not impacting that, and they're receiving a high quality service from us.
Okay, thank you. Have you got
just we don't just take fire that. We do a lot of road accidents, especially around 8-6 recently been having a lot of road accidents. So we are not just out there just taking fire at that. We are doing other stuff. So it's important to keep every single work. So last thing I want to see more cuts. So I will support that £5 increase.
So if there aren't any further questions, I'll put that to the vote. Recommendations are there. Moving from chair and seconded. All of us agree?
Agree.
There we are. Thank you. And now I'll go forward to the full authority. Okay. Item 7. Revenue Capital Prudential Code.
This is where there's been a slight duplication. So that was the item which I covered first.
Sorry, members. I think there was an error in the report pack that was published to you. So item 7 is a duplicate of item 4. So there's an addendum that's been published, which is item 7A, which is audited statement of accounts.
So we're on which one?
We've missed item 6, which is audited.
Me throwing you out.
You're on item 6 now, yeah?
Item 6.
Is that the one?
Here.
Sorry,
which is item 6?
Item 6.
Right. Item 6.
Item 6.
That's completion.
Yes.
It's a minor test on the problem. Yeah.
Pages. What pages? It says 2 font.
I think it might have gone out as a separate addendum.
Yes.
Was it one of these?
Separate attachment. Yeah. I think it's that small one.
The small
one in your hand. I think.
Has everybody got a copy?
Yeah,
That's
okay,
what
right.
it's on
Yeah,
like-
you got one, yeah.
It's a separate copy here if you like.
The online is on.
It's a smaller one.
I got it.
Well, I'll just cover the recommendations and I'll pass it on to Richard. So within this report, obviously, is to consider the contents of the external auditor's report and then approve delegation for the Treasurer and the Chair to basically sign the final auditor report. And then obviously any changes will be reported at a future meeting. I'll hand over to Richard.
Thank you. So, yeah, this report is draft, but that's a kind of technicality. It's always draft until we've finished, and we haven't quite finished it. So we'll reissue this as a final when we're done. But as I'll take you through in a moment, we're actually in a really good place compared to lots of other local authority audits at the moment. For a disclaimed audit, I think you're the most progressed one that I've got. So that also is quite a good status. And this report basically is pretty much finished in terms of the outcome of the buildback assurance work and some more detail about what the actual nature of the opinion is. But I'm going to come back to that later. So this report covers two broad areas of our work for this year. First one is the completion of the 24-25 audit. That's the main thing that we're employed to do. That's the main work that we will cover. And then there's also, so I'll go through that first, and then I'll come back and give you some more detail about the buildback assurance project, which is doing the work, looking at the years where you didn't get an audit a couple of years ago. So first I'll take you to page 5 of the report, which is the summary of our findings for this year's audit. This, as I mentioned, we're in a good position and we're largely complete, so we'll be able to complete our audit by the deadline at the end of February. There's a few issues there in the box at the bottom right-hand side of this box, listing the things that are left to complete on the audit, but a lot of them are basic kind of final checks and my review of the audit file, my team's response to my comments and kind of final kind of closure items on the audit, but we're very well progressed. This page also gives you a summary of the overarching findings of the audit, and the main kind of headline is that we've completed our work over the significant audit risks and other audit risks, and we don't have significant matters to report to you. So that basically is what you want out of an audit, in that we've been through all the detail, we've done all the procedures that we set out to do, and we don't have significant matters to report to you. So they're the riskier areas that we pulled out in our report. And there's a couple of pages of detail in the following pages that goes through. There's a page per risk that basically sets out the procedure that we did in regards to management controls, which is assuming that management are seeking to use adjustments to kind of inappropriately report things. So we've got set procedures in response to that. The valuation of the numbers in there in regards to your pension fund numbers, really complex area of estimation. So we've got a team of specialists who spend all their time looking at valuation of pensions. Better people than I am, I can do it, but there you go. So they spent their time doing that. And then also some specific procedures we've completed in regards to the valuation of land and builders, which again is a specialist area of estimation, so kind of open to amendment. Those pages set that out. Page 11, which goes through the other areas of our audit work. So we're required specifically in our audit opinion to comment on whether we think your narrative report is consistent with our understanding. So the front 20 or 30 pages of your accounts is a lot of words that describes what's gone on at the Fire Authority for the year. Sometimes they're written in a positive spin, sometimes they're not as consistent with the actual truth, and so we're basically required to read that and sense check that it is consistent with our understanding. We've done that and we're happy with the content. We also look at the annual governance statement, which is a really important document setting out the issues that have been in place at the authority during the period and the controls and processes that you have in place. There's very specific guidance about what needs to be in that, so sometimes things are missing and not all the details in there. We've looked at that and we're happy with what you've got in terms of that statement. We also then required to do some work in regards to whole of government accounts, but that isn't a significant matter for yourselves, so just confirming that. Page 13 is our value for money work. This will hopefully be familiar to you because we reported this at the last committee, remember? So we went through this and we had to report kind of publicly at the end of November the status of the audit, but we completed our value for money work at that stage, so we've already reported these findings. As you can see, you haven't got colour, have you? So they're all kind of highlighted green in the public versions on the website. We didn't identify significant risk areas, and therefore there are no significant weaknesses in your arrangements, and that kind of tallies with the comments you have there about being effective and efficient, and the papers you got in front of you in terms of budgets, lots of detailed paperwork there. So that narrative there I won't dwell on because we've already been through those at the last meeting. Page 22, to skip forward past that value for money stuff, that highlights our audit fee. There's various different lines there in regards to specific extra bits of work we've been asked to complete for the period. The first few are where there's either been a change in legislation, so there's an extra audit standard that's required to cover in regards to IFRS 16. That's a change in regards to the way leases have been done, so there's quite a fundamental change in the guidance there, required to go through that. And the disclaimer and modified audit reporting, because we're going to be issuing something other than a standard audit report, going through that wording, checking with our legal department that what we're saying is correct, takes a bit of extra time and effort. You'll see there that that's reduced from the first year because we've made a lot of progress in terms of what we're saying, so it's a little bit more straightforward to consult on that, so that's dropped. The two in regards to build back assurance, they're quite big, but they're in regards to the project that I'll come on to at the end, so I'll come back to that and hopefully you'll understand how that fee fits together. My understanding is that the authority will have received some form of grant funding to help fund that. I think it's less than that number, but I believe that each authority that has got a disclaimer audit report will have had some grant funding from the department to help cover that. And then also, what that project is about looking back at the periods where you didn't get an audit, and I think my understanding is that you also get a rebate from the auditors that were in place at the time. So I think generally that the fees will be about right. Page 24, 23 and 24 confirms our independence. We haven't completed any non-audit work in regards to you for the period, so that confirms that we are to be independent to carry out your work. 25 and 26, basically they are quite empty because we haven't found any large errors that required amending. There's been some disclosure amendments, as there always would be. The main one that you've had is in regards to accounting policies for leases linked through to the IFRS 16 work that I referred to, but that's quite a common thing we've found this year. Page 27 sets out a couple of control recommendations that we've got. The first one is in regards to that lease thing that we think as you kind of move that into business as usual, that you can make a change in regards to how that's been prepared and that's been agreed. And we found in our declarations of interest testing, there was one member that there wasn't a declaration of interest, so we couldn't basically get that all pulled together. They have left the authority in May, so they're no longer here, so we haven't been able to track down a kind of post-date declaration. We've done some procedures, so we don't think that's actually a matter that would lead to any kind of error in the accounts. We've done some kind of searches of the individual, but we were happy with that, but there's a process point that we think could be tightened up. And then we look on page 28 back to the recommendations that we made last year. Progress has been made in regards to all three of them. One of them is completely implemented and the other two are in track. We're content with the reasons why they're partially implemented, so there's no concerns there for us to raise. So that's everything I wanted to say in regards to this year's audit. I'm happy to pause there and then I'll go back a bit on the build back assurance afterwards, if that's okay. So I have to take any questions on that bit.
Any questions? No. Fine, carry on. Okay. So page 4, we go right back to the start of the report. It's the first page after the dark pages. This kind of explains back the story of where we are. So a lot of that hopefully you'll be familiar with, and that we explained it last year and we've touched on it a few times about the period where there was no audit opinions in effect given for a couple of periods. And last year we disclaimed our audit opinion largely because of the short amount of time that we had to complete an audit. And so there's a lot of history there, we don't necessarily need to go into that. But on the right side of this page is what we've done about this. So a lot of guidance was published back in the summer, and that basically set a framework for audit firms to follow in order to go back and work through
to decide whether there were any risks linked to those years that weren't subject to audit that would have an impact on this year's financial statements. So a lot of your accounts, generally your assets get revalued. So if they weren't valued correctly 5 years ago, they'll be sorted out now. So we can have it doesn't really matter from that point of view. It's important for that year, but in this year's accounts, it would have been caught up with. Your debtors and creditors and working capital and cash balances, all of that will be updated now. So if we're happy with the position at the end of March 25, whether it was right or wrong in March 23 is kind of irrelevant for that audit opinion. But there are some areas that we want to undertake procedures to understand whether there is any wider risk. So the risk of missing expenditure or income that was invented that never happened. There's things like that that could still theoretically be risks that would end up in this year's accounts. So we've done a line-by-line assessment going through back to the first period that wasn't subject to audit, those couple of years plus the year that we audited. We've got a big kind of analysis project that has gone through and gone line by line to see how things have moved. If anything's jumped up, what's the reason for it? Can we understand it? We've been through lots of minutes and meetings. We've watched some of the budget meetings and financial reports back through for the period that we've got. The fact it's all recorded is really helpful for us to actually be able to go back and audit something 3 years ago, which go back 10 years, it wouldn't have been possible, but a lot of it is available. So we've done a lot of that analysis. And as a result of all of that, the one thing that we thought we actually need to do some testing on is the area of when you bought assets, so capital spending instead of revenue spending. Because the risk is that you've put something down as capital, so you've described it as a capital project, but it isn't actually capital in nature and it should have been revenue. So the impact of that is that when it's capital, it goes on your balance sheet and it hits your budget through your minimum revenue provision charge, kind of about 5-6% of that total cost each year. So that's the kind of impact of that. So it has the saving in that year of basically saving 90% of the cost in that first year. So it's a way of kind of putting off the impact of that spend for over a much longer period of time. So that's the only area, and it's a common thing, so it's not just something specific to yourselves, it's the one that we found most in terms of looking at things, that we want to go back and understand and just double check, do some testing of those periods, those couple of years that weren't subject to audit, of the capital expenditure in those periods. And that work's ongoing, so that's the last thing that we've got to do. We set that out on page 20 of this report, which basically summarises exactly what I've just said. And so in the final version of the report, I think that's probably the only thing that's really going to change, is that the right-hand side of that box will give you a summary of what we found in the testing of that. It's not significant amounts, so it isn't like there's massive projects that we want particularly to look at. It is the kind of standard capital expenditure, but we think that there's enough of a risk there for us to want to do some testing. So when we've done that, pulling it all together, we then will have looked at the period that didn't have an audit opinion, understood the impact of that on this year's audit, and then done procedures to respond to that. So if we can get through those procedures by the end of February, we'll then have done everything we need to quote unquote rebuild assurance. So we then are in a position of, we're then happy with your closing balance sheet, and that then allows us to go through the process. It'll take 2 or 3 years, because the way the numbers flow through the accounts, to get you to a clean audit opinion, which is what this whole project's been about. But this year is the year that we should be able to move from continued disclaiming to getting to a place where we're able to give a good audit opinion. So the fact that you're in that place is great, because lots of our places that were sort of to disclaimer aren't getting to that place and are still 2 or 3 years behind. There's some places where we still haven't been able to get through a year's audit in the period because the finance team aren't used to it, or there's been various problems going on. So the fact that you're here is a very positive place to be. Whether we can get there by the end of February or not is something that we're working through and trying to do. There's a call with lots of technical auditors straight after this committee, so 12:30, see whether they can get back to the office for it. But the exact wording of our opinion, there was some more guidance came out just for Christmas, so we're trying to work through that and the exact impact of it. Yeah, we're hoping to get there by the end of February. There's a judgment call whether, if we're very close, we may just actually miss the deadline and sign it a week later, because then it makes next year's audit a lot better. But we'll go and talk to finance people to make sure you're all aware of that, so it doesn't come as a surprise. But we're that close, so it's a very positive place to be. So happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you. Terry?
So I think on the upshot of all of that, we're in a good position.
Yeah.
We've caught up with our backlog of problems.
Yeah.
So next year's audit will be somewhat simpler. I would imagine.
Fingers crossed.
Then we're happy, I think.
Yeah, that's where it to be.
Yeah, does that mean it'd be cheaper?
Well, the cost of doing the audit, the extra 50 odd grand that we've charged, that wouldn't be something next year. I think the biggest change will be that next year, all things being equal, we'll be able to sign the opinion in whenever we can get it sorted, so September, October, November, so which will allow the finance team to not be bothered by us during your budget process, back to somewhat towards normality, because over the last 3 or 4 years you've had no audit for ages, and then when we turned up, we've had 2 or 3 audits in a really short period of time, and so then now we're back to a normal position. So that's the biggest kind of benefit of it in the initial period, I think.
Should these audits, should they be annual? You mentioned them not been.
Yeah.
What were the reasons historically for not being audited?
A large question. Point of fact, KPMG weren't in the audit market during that period, so we weren't involved in that market at this stage. So auditors will have their own reasons for each individual position. The sector-wide understanding is that there basically was an increase in compliance costs of what it took to do an audit. That was at the same time as the contract was relet at a national level and audit fees kind of dropped by 40%. So you've seen our audit fees a lot higher than they were for the years that the audit didn't happen. You go back to the period before that contract was set, audit fees were a bit higher. So there's a big drop in fees. Some audit firms won more work than they thought they were going to win and then couldn't resource them. That's the summary. I can share some papers on it if you'd find it useful, because there's some quite big national reports about. I think one was at the committee probably this time last year, maybe 2 years ago. There was a paper from Financial Reporting Council setting out the impact of it, but the long and short of it, it was resourcing of audits was a problem. That's now in effect fixed because there's more audit firms involved than there were under the old contract, and audit fees are higher. So when I'm trying to argue for staff to work on my audit, I can point out that this contractor was this fee, whereas if I had the older fee, I'd be at the bottom of the queue because there's other things and commercial decisions kind of flow from that. But we're not involved in that process, so let's be clear.
Basically it was a national issue.
Yeah.
Having shortage of audit staff. So
Yeah,
that's
so
what created all issues, and obviously that doesn't help places like us, a small compared to big councils.
Yeah. Well, I think Nottingham City were also subject to delays, and Nottingham County probably as well. So I think lots of it kind of depended in the geography of where the contracts went, because you go back 10 years, the Audit Commission, when that was privatised, the staff moved from there to offices in the local area. So I live in East Midlands. I've always audited East Midland body, and I'm someone. There's only about 120 of us who are qualified enough to do the role that I do in signing off the accounts. But I didn't have a contract to do an audit, so I couldn't do it. So that's probably a point of thing. But we're past that now. We're in the place, and you yourselves are in a positive position. And the audit market and the kind of National Audit Office, the Financial Reporting Council, the Ministry have all put lots of things in place that it should begin to be solved. And you look at the numbers that don't comply with the deadlines. Last year, there's still only about 20 left that weren't signed off for last year. They've all got very specific reasons why they haven't been signed off. The vast majority were signed off on time. You'll see the compliance is already 100 odd signed off already for this year. It's getting better bit by bit. So as a market, it's improving.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a couple of bits. Just first of all, thanks to Bev as previous head of finance and Tom and the team for all their work, and for how Richard's worked with the team as well. I just wanted to put that on record. It is a real challenge, and to be in this position, from experience of working with a number of other bodies, is a good position to be in. And the other point was just in terms of other work that's going on. SIPFA are looking at how they can simplify some of the financial reporting. Obviously, the accounts that you get are vast and growing by the year. So there is work there through the Better Reporting Group to look at how, again, they can be streamlined and simpler to understand, which again will hopefully help when it comes to the audit and comes to preparation as well.
I think, as Richard said, the sun's coming out now, isn't it? Because it was a nightmare. Not many years ago. It was awful, wasn't it? Every authority all over we were all sort of backlogged, and it overlapped and everything else. I think you can see that, and thank all the people that were involved in trying to pull the ship round. Are there any other questions? No other questions? We agreed to that recommendation, which is on page 3 in this one. Yeah, agreed. Thank you. So we'll move on to it. Item 7 is a duplicate bit. I've now got my head around that. Hey, I should have taken it out. Where are we? Exclusion of the public to consider excluding the public from... Sorry? Sorry? Oh, 7A, sorry.
There's a spare pack here if you...
Right. Oh, the auditor state. We'll scrap them, I think.
Yeah.
Shove them out the way we use
Item 7.
We're there. 7A before I move that along. Page 3.
Yeah.
What 3?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this one's just about. This one's just back to me. So a lot follows on from what Richard said as part of his report. So it's just asking members to consider the audited accounts and to delegate basically the signing of those accounts following the completion of the work. So I've noticed a small typo in paragraph 2. It basically should say, instead of the follow amendments, it's basically no amendments have been required to the core statements. And then paragraph 2.3 just sets out the slight changes in the accounts from the version that were presented to the October committee. So as you see, there's been some rounding corrections. A slight amendment to note 26, and then following the MRP review, which we've talked about previously, that required a change to note 36, and then there's been a table added as part of note 39. And then, as Richard touched on, the largest amendment was just expanding the lease accounting policy just to meet RFS 16 requirements. So other than that, the accounts are kind of the same as presented in October. So if there's any questions.
No questions.
Make it easy.
Just thinking.
Thank you. Yeah. So that document was presented in its full in October. So like I said, it's only those handful of slight amendments.
No?
Yeah, that's fine.
We have recommendations? Okay, agreed.
Thank
you. Oh, I'll read that little bit off there now. How can we avoid that again? Okay. How can we avoid that again? Because I've seen that today, so we need to get them earlier, don't we?
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
Right, item 8, exclusion of the public. Consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, which is under Schedule 12A Part 1, on the basis that, having regard to all circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. I'll move that. We agreed?
Yes.